Good morning from the Nasdaq in Times Square. I'm Brad Smith, and you're watching Nasdaq Spotlight. Today, we look at China, a nation known for oil and coal production that hinders the living conditions sometimes. It's now igniting an energy transition strategy aimed to decrease pollution and ultimately save lives as well. To further dive into this, we're joined by Dr. Jon Creyts, Managing Director at Rocky Mountain Institute. Jon, great to have you here.
Thanks so much, Brad. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, and especially to talk about such an important topic that has kind of hindered China's population for quite some time. So to see how they're transitioning into a renewable energy and sustainable production environment that they can provide there. So we've read a lot about China transitioning towards this renewable energy and reducing its dependence on coal. Is this really happening? How much focus is the government putting into this as well?
Absolutely. It is really happening, Brad. And it's one of the highest priority issues in China right now for a number of reasons, right? Ranging from the fact that its cities are choking down through a desire to create a new economic engine that lifts them from producing pure commodities on a global scale, all the way through to a real concerted belief in climate change, that it's really happening. And the result is that we're starting to see, from the overall level, a reduction in coal production, right? Very clearly, there were just some national statistics released a couple days ago that showed that China has decreased its overall coal consumption for the third year in a row. And it shut down a series of 30 coal plants that it had intentions to build, canceled those coal plants. When you run the numbers, they've actually substituted for those coal plants the equivalent solar to produce power for about 10 million homes.
Wow.
Right? So it's a giant transition that's happening where real money is moving, real capital being deployed differently based on a set of national goals.
Now, I've personally never been to China. I need to know, have you been to China, Jon?
Many times.
Many times. So what are you seeing on the ground over there then? What kind of transition, what are the results of this transition that's taking place?
Yeah, so clearly you are seeing big shifts in terms of overall size and scale of installations of clean energy, right? That's a primary area. And in particular, on solar and wind, China is leading the world right now in both. It's been basically doubling its capacity every year of solar that it put in the ground. As I mentioned, 10 million homes worth put in this year. On the wind side, roughly the equivalent amount was put in this year as well. And it is the undisputed leader in terms of global production capacity and installation in both of those areas. But we see it also beyond kind of large-scale renewables in how they're approaching electric vehicles and thinking about clean mobility, and also in how they think about energy efficiency, because oftentimes the cheapest energy is the energy that you don't use to begin with. And so areas like LED lighting and buildings controls, you're seeing very clear expansion of markets in China and growth and public policies that support a dynamic deployment of capital to really spur these industries forward.
So it sounds like beyond shifting away from the coal, oil, production that they've had for years, it's more about having a smart type of building, smart efficiency that they're kind of integrating within their daily infrastructure, whether that's on the energy consumption side at some of their buildings, it sounds like.
That's exactly right. So there is a focus now on the smart use of energy. So we're combining, efficient with smart, and we're seeing a convergence of IT with the energy system. And we've been talking about kind of the energy internet for a while here, but the scale that China is moving at right now is really moving it to the forefront and ensuring that it really comes forward much faster than I think most people are prepared for right now. So we're seeing automated building controls, we're seeing the ability to integrate microgrids, we're seeing the ability to kind of deploy mid-scale, what in China they call zero net carbon districts or low carbon development at scale very quickly, that's got automated kind of investments in storage, automated investments in solar, automated investments in local generation, all linked together.
Now, when you think about the realm that we hear Nasdaq deal within, which is the investment side, which is, the opportunity for investors to kind of take advantage or spot where some of the trends are in China and leverage that to their own advantage for a little bit. What does this energy transition bring? What opportunity for U.S. investors?
Yeah, so a couple different areas. One, you can expect that the core components of this clean energy transition for China are going to continue to grow in scale in China and get cheaper as global commodities, right? So that sets up, when you think about solar on a cost decline of 70% over the past 5 years, right? That trend is going to continue, and you can start thinking about how, as an investor, can you take advantage of that on a global scale in whatever local market you're in, as an input to an overall service model. So I think it unlocks opportunities for finance, opportunities for different types of installation, et cetera, where you can layer on top of that efficiency that China has up front, right? I think on the growth side, you could think about a China investment portfolio, right, as being a very high growth market that's being supported by the government and pushed from a policy perspective as being the potential for investment. But I'd always caution, investors to think before they invest blindly in China, because it's not a pure market dynamic environment.
Right.
And on the con side, I think you have to think very carefully about the strategic risks around rapidly emerging competitors that are going to be spurred by these opportunities in China that could be taken advantage of again, government support and bringing that out into the international markets. And so be very aware and kind of do your due diligence on what types of threats could emerge to your existing portfolio.
Now, what about the transportation industry? What is that all playing into this overall renewable energy shift? How is that kind of coming into this broader picture?
Yeah, so obviously in the United States, we see the convergence of a number of big themes around electrification, around autonomy and mobility. So you're seeing Google and Apple and different companies see this as a giant opportunity that they're deploying against. And similarly in China, the equivalent of Google in China, the Baidu, is trying to pioneer the idea of an autonomous car and link it to last mile solutions that kind of allow people to get from wherever the public transportation ends to their final home. We're going to see more of an emphasis on that in China and grow at scale. China depends, its mobility systems are really structured around its cities. And so China spends a lot of time thinking about infrastructure investments in high-speed rail and subway systems and light rail systems in its city, and has some of the best in the world right now, right? And they're looking to place those outward in the world as well, in addition to expanding and urbanizing the country. Keep in mind, China is going to urbanize the equivalent of an entire United States here over the next 20 years, bringing people from a rural environment into cities. And so that's a massive infrastructure play. But one of the most interesting things, recent story from going back and forth to China, there's been a little bit of a startup competition between two companies there on literally bike sharing mobility, where they've got very slick systems that allow you to basically scan your smartphone against a bicycle, jump on it, ride it down the street, and get to where you need to go. There are two companies that have both raised about $500 million of capital to invest in competing systems that allow not just people to ease their transportation needs and cover short distances in an eco-friendly way, but also serve as a network interconnection to the internet and as a way to link to social media, and really drive a whole customer class of lifestyle-friendly services around it. So it's been quite remarkable to see these two. And in my last trips to China, I go there about once a month. My last 3 trips to China, I've seen 3 iterations of different types of cycles as they've improved the model of the bicycle, the interface software, et cetera. In 3 months, 3 different improvements in successive rapid entrepreneurial deployment. So the pace and scale of change in China is just remarkable, even in something as simple as a bicycle.
Now, just based on that alone, it sounds like, so two things. Number one, it sounds like there's an amazing market for the Hyperloop that we know is being developed over there.
Yeah.
I mean, so it sounds like Elon Musk will have a considerable portion of business that perhaps goes to China, and then as well thinking about how they're connecting the biking system with some of their social sharing that's taking place, knowing that a lot of the same social apps that we use here on stateside in the U.S. May not and are not used in China because of the restrictions on the internet there as well. So what are you seeing in terms of some of the social apps, for instance, that they may be using to connect that with?
Yeah, so there are two dominant social apps that they use in China, and by far the one that all of your viewers should be aware of is WeChat.
WeChat, okay.
Right? WeChat is it's an integrated software platform that allows you to communicate, to share information, to link to news, et cetera, with voice calling, and it is very slick,
okay,
very good. Everyone should look at it just to get a sense of what's happening in China, and you can get your own WeChat account. But more importantly, it's a great way to harvest some of what's going on in China. So you can actually subscribe to different groups and get a sense of what exactly is going on. And even if you don't speak Chinese, there's a quick and easy translate function.
Sure.
That allows you to hear firsthand on the ground, if you can't go there,
right,
what's the discussion like on clean energy issues.
Right. And so do you find that some of the discussions, and this is kind of where I'm getting back to, because if we bring it back to the energy side and how this is actually impacting people who are living in the nation, are a lot of those discussions that take place, are they coming back to issues with how the energy historically has affected their living conditions there, and now how some of the new advancements are able to really kind of redefine their expectations on the government and how it can set a new precedent for what their living conditions should be, better living environment and less pollution because of this renewable energy.
Absolutely, Brad. I think the idea that a general population is linked and able to see this problem of the immediate smog that's right out in front of you, and then be able to think about how can I solve this entrepreneurially with a solution as simple as bicycles, or thinking about what's the next step in really promoting electric vehicles, or how do you get more efficient buildings, or that ultimately consume less energy and need fewer coal power plants. These are all things and ideas that are spurred and are right now serving as a real crucible for ideas to come together alongside entrepreneurial activity.
That's
so
amazing.
It's really exciting to see.
Absolutely, and especially that the conversation is still taking place over some of those social networks, because as we know from some of the things that take place on the U.S. side, that's where a lot of those key conversations that drive a lot of change actually take place. So,
and this is one of the topics in China that's not verboten, right? It's there is a recognition by China that it needs to deal with this, right? And so it's looking for those types of solutions, and certainly their actions at the international stage have played up to that. Leadership up to the Paris Accord and beyond. China really sees this as a solution that it needs to provide to itself, but also a solution that it can provide to the rest of the world. And that government commitment behind the market forces is what makes China such an interesting and dynamic economy on clean energy issues today.
Absolutely. What about the power sector? How is that changing over there?
Yeah, the power sector is going through, it's basically jumping from 1950s United States to 2015 United States in the course of 2 years, right? They're on a very aggressive reform trajectory right now, trying to create a wholesale market on the generation side, or all the different power plants that feed in, at the same time that they're deregulating the retail side and allowing many more options for companies to go out and sell to individual customers. Now, those are all still connected by a large state grid corporation in the north or a southern grid in the south. So there's a common platform that the government is still investing in and maintaining as infrastructure. But we're seeing many more companies and opportunities emerge on either end of that to both provide and to ultimately sell to customers different types of options on how to procure power and what kind of power it is in the end.
And so when we think about how this transitions into the building sector as well, are they continuing to build and kind of really start off their new building process? Because if we look at the U.S. side, we're looking at an environment where we've seen new housing starts, hit kind of highs there, as well as some of the new building starts as well, because there's such an increase in demand for having new offices, having new places for people to live. So is there the same kind of sentiment over there, and are they immediately working in some of these new energy features into those buildings and the new building starts there?
Yeah, and the answer is yes. They are, they are scaling, and yes, they are deploying, and it's really tremendous. I mean, this is an area where China has urbanized, again, an entire United States here over the last 20 years, an entire United States over the next 20 years.
Right.
They're getting really good at construction fast, right? But now there's even more of a focus on quality and making sure those buildings are energy efficient.
Right.
And in the long term, don't squander assets by being inefficient and requiring more energy, more use. And so there's a focus on quality, there's a focus on efficiency. Let me just give you one quick example of how things are changing there, which is, China has a tremendous manufacturing capacity, right? And they're linking that to their construction capacity in prefab buildings, right? And right now, recently, one of the companies in China called Broad Group build a 57-story building, super energy efficient, earthquake resistant, in a matter of 19 days by modular construction, where they literally built 3 floors a day. And the building is tremendous quality, but it is that efficiency in the end, and the fact that they were able to assemble it with the precision of a manufacturing kind of enterprise that's astounding. And you could imagine one day, not too distant future, where you or I order our home, right, and have it delivered to us and just placed on a foundation that we ultimately, kind of set up just for that purpose, and that it's exactly built to spec, and that it is the highest performing building possible, rather than wrangling with contractors about trying to figure out how exactly to get things to a level that the local capacity may not be, educated on or able to deliver.
Yeah, it's amazing when we hear about some of the advancements in 3D printing. I was reading an article the other day about a home that was built completely off of a 3D printer. So it's amazing to hear that, perhaps there's another huge market there in China as well, as we think about some of the new buildings that are going to be taking shape, no pun intended. Lastly, Rocky Mountain Institute, tell us about some of the work that you're doing there as well.
Yeah, so we have been really partnered with some of the leading energy think tanks in China here for the past several years, helping them think through how do they migrate off fossil fuels and substitute those, providing energy security, but also dealing with this issue of pollution. And so we've helped them build a roadmap and think through that transition, and showed basically that China can grow its economy here 6-fold through 2050, while dramatically reducing overall its energy requirements and commitments. And that has been kind of the core of working with the government to make that happen, and it's been partially built into what they call their 13th five-year plan and how they're thinking about going forward. We've now been really working with cities and working with the electricity sector on how exactly you regulate that transition and move through it in a way that makes sense, that ultimately creates good economic value, good decisions, at the same time that it deals with these issues of ecological, financial, and energy security that China really wants to balance in the process of achieving its next stage of growth.
Absolutely. John, just before we wrap, what for those of the viewers that may have joined us a little bit late, what advice would you give to investors, millennials, business people who are looking at this renewable energy space in China and are seeing an opportunity, if you will?
Yeah. So one, I would say, globally, expect that the solutions are going to come out and really recognize the opportunity to layer on top of low-cost commodity solutions, service models, right? That would be one key area. Secondly, if you're interested in China and you see this as a growth opportunity, just do your homework and make sure you understand how the local market works, because it's very different, and kind of market forces may not be the only determinant in who wins in the end, right? And then the third thing that I would say is that the age of the energy internet, the age of the connected, of us being connected more directly by our smart tools to the energy that we consume is here, right? Over the next 5 years, we're going to see that come to us by leaps and bounds, and just expect to have a much closer relationship and much more choice on what it is you consume, how it is you consume it, and be able to hopefully, choose for yourself a pathway that's right for you, that is right for us all.
Absolutely. Jon, great to have you here. I don't think I could have said the due diligence part better myself as a vessel for our Nasdaq legal team. So absolutely do your own due diligence before investing. Jon, great to have your insights here on the Nasdaq Facebook Live today.
Thank you, Brad. It's been a pleasure.
Certainly. And thank you all for watching live. Stay tuned for more coming from the Nasdaq market site throughout the rest of the day.